clatter of silverware was the only sound in the Vale family dining room that evening. The chandelier threw a cold, golden light over the long mahogany table where 4 people sat: Seren, her parents, and her older brother, Landon. Landon just closed on his second condo in Manhattan, her mother, Marcia, said, slicing into her salmon with clinical precision. Imagine that, 29 years old and already a property mogul. Her father, Leonard, smiled at his son the way some men admire a mirror image of themselves. It's not luck, it's discipline. You set your goals, you hit them. That's what winners do. Seren kept her eyes on her plate. She learned that the safest way to survive these dinners was silence. But her father wasn't finished. And what about you, Seren? Still working at that little design firm, are you? I am, she said quietly. We just launched her. He cut her off with a laugh that scraped her nerves raw. Launched? You make logos for bakeries. Landon's negotiating with investors in Hong Kong and you're coloring cupcake boxes. Her mother dabbed her mouth with her napkin. Honestly, sweetheart, maybe it's time to think realistically. You're almost 27, you can't drift forever. Landon smirked, the perfect golden child in a charcoal suit. She'll figure it out, Mom. Not everyone's built for the grind. The remark landed soft but strung deep. Seren forced a smile, but inside something cracked, a hairline fracture in her patience that had been building for years. I'm working on something bigger, she said, something I believe in. Her father chuckled. Belief doesn't buy houses. Marcia added, You'll never own a house like your brother, Seren. Some people just aren't meant for that kind of life. The room went quiet after that. Seren stared at her reflection in the wine glass, small, blurry, replaceable. She swallowed hard. That sentence, you'll never own a house like your brother, looped in her mind like a curse. She smiled faintly. We'll see, she said. Landon laughed and the conversation moved on, but Seren's silence had changed. It wasn't defeat anymore, it was the sound of a fuse being lit. That night, back in her small apartment in Queens, Seren opened her laptop and stared at the screen until the city outside went dark. She wasn't sure if it was rage or adrenaline pushing her, but she started writing ideas, half-mad, half-brilliant scribbles about an app she'd been dreaming of for months, a platform that helped small businesses design, brand, and sell themselves without paying corporate prices. She named it Novamark. Every click, every sketch was a promise to herself. She'd spent years designing for others, building other people's visions, watching her own ideas die in meetings. Not anymore. She slept 3 hours a night. She lived on black coffee and the echo of her father's voice telling her she'd never own a house like Landon. Weeks turned into months. She maxed out her credit cards, took freelance jobs at dawn, coded through the night. She failed more times than she could count, but failure became fuel. When Novamark finally launched, it wasn't perfect, but it worked. And within 3 months, it had 1,000 users. By month 6, it had 50,000. Investors started calling. The first was a venture fund from Austin offering $1.2 million for seed investment. Seren almost laughed when she saw the number. She had to read it 3 times. She didn't tell her family, not yet. Instead, she moved quietly, like a storm forming far from shore. 1 year later, Novamark hit its first 1 million users. Seren's name was starting to circulate in tech circles. Interviews, podcasts, magazine features. She was the quiet founder people wanted to know more about. The same week, Landon bought a $3.8 million condo in Soho. Novamark's valuation crossed $30 million. Seren saw the article about her brother's purchase on social media. Local developer Landon Vale expands real estate portfolio. She scrolled through the photos, Landon holding champagne, their parents beside him, smiling like royalty. No mention of her, no call, nothing. But that was fine. She was planning something that didn't need their validation. She wanted to buy her own house, no, not a house, a statement. Something bigger, bolder, something Landon could never touch. She hired a real estate scout under an alias and started searching. It took 6 months before she found it. A glass and stone masterpiece overlooking the Atlantic in Miami, listed at $5.2 million. She didn't hesitate. Within 48 hours, she wired the payment in cash from her business account. The seller thought she was joking until the transaction cleared. Seren Vale, the useless daughter, had just bought her mansion outright. She didn't want revenge through headlines, she wanted it face to face. She invited her family to Miami under the pretense of a business event. Her mother's voice on the phone was bright but cautious. "Oh, you're hosting something, how lovely, should we bring Landon?" "Of course," Seren said. When the Vales arrived, they were met at the gate by a private driver and a sleek black golf cart that wound through palm trees up to the mansion. The house rose like a vision of glass and sun, framed by the sea. Marcia gasped, "Whose house is this?" Seren smiled, "You'll see." Landon stepped out of the cart, his designer shoes crunching on the white gravel. "Wow, whoever owns this place, they're doing all right." She led them inside. The living room opened to a wall of ocean. Every detail, Italian marble floors, gold-rimmed fixtures, art curated by Seren herself, was a quiet declaration of power. Her father looked around, his jaw tightening. "So whose event is this again?" Seren turned to him, the ocean light cutting across her face. "Mine." Marcia blinked. "Yours." Seren nodded. "Welcome to my home." The silence that followed was delicious. Landon laughed uncertainly. "Come on, no way, you're renting this for a weekend, right?" Seren handed him the title deed. Her name was printed in bold at the bottom, Seren Vale, owner, paid in full. Marcia's fingers trembled as she read it. 5.2 million. Seren met her eyes, calm, steady. "Cash before my brother could." Her father's face drained of color. Landon's smirk vanished. "You said I'd never own a house like him," Seren said softly. "So I didn't, I bought one better." They didn't stay long, pride couldn't survive in that air. When the car pulled away, Seren walked back inside and stood by the glass wall overlooking the water. The world outside was quiet except for the sea. She thought she'd feel victorious. Instead, she felt something cleaner, peace. Because revenge wasn't about breaking them, it was about proving she could stand where they said she'd never reach. Still, she smiled when her phone buzzed an hour later. A message from Landon. "Congrats, sis, didn't see that coming." She typed back, "You never do." The house was quiet again after the car rolled down the driveway, the kind of quiet that used to scare her back in Queens, but now it felt like oxygen. Seren let the silence stretch until her heartbeat slowed. The air smelled faintly of salt and new marble. She poured a glass of sparkling water, leaned against the counter, and let herself replay the look on her father's face. The moment disbelief turned into the smallest flicker of regret. That was the real victory. But she wasn't done yet. The next morning her phone buzzed, a call from an unknown number. "Ms. Vale," a clipped voice said. "This is Angela Firth from the Chronicle. We're running a feature on self-made female founders in tech. We'd love to include you." Seren almost laughed. "Sure," she said, "why not?" She did the interview 2 days later. Angela asked about Novamark, about perseverance, about being underestimated. Seren kept her answers simple, calm, deliberate, a tone that said, "I don't need to brag, the work speaks for itself." When the article came out, it exploded. From rejection to $50 million valuation, the quiet rise of Seren Vale. Her parents saw it, of course, everyone saw it. The text started again, long, uncomfortable apologies that didn't sound like apologies. "We are proud of you, sweetheart. Maybe we were too hard on you before. You've done well for yourself." She didn't answer. Instead, she forwarded the article to Landon with a single line. "Still think I'm not built for the grind." He read it, he didn't reply. A few weeks later, Seren was invited to a gala in New York, one of those high-ceiling events where money floated like perfume. She almost skipped it until she saw the guest list. Landon Vale, real estate developer. Leonard and Marcia Vale, philanthropists. She smiled, perfect. That evening she arrived in a black silk gown that looked poured onto her hair swept back, calm and regal. The room turned when she walked in, not because she demanded attention, but because she'd become the kind of woman people wanted to know. She spotted them near the champagne bar. Her parents froze mid-conversation when they saw her. "Seren," her mother said, smile brittle, "you look stunning, darling." Her father cleared his throat. "We read your interview, impressive work." Landon just nodded, his jaw tight. Congratulations. Seren returned the nod, polite as marble. Thank you. There was a long pause, heavy with everything they'd said over the years. Finally, her father tried to bridge it. We were only ever trying to push you towards stability, you know. We didn't mean to tell me I'd never own a house like my brother. Seren finished, her voice quiet. I remember exactly what you meant. He sighed. People say things in frustration. People remember things in pain, she said. The silence between them felt like glass ready to break. Then a journalist approached. Excuse me, Ms. Vale, could we get a photo for the event coverage? The flash popped. Seren smiled, cool, luminous, and the picture ran the next morning under the caption, Seren Vale, founder of Novamark, at the Metropolitan Tech Gala. Her parents weren't mentioned. Later that night, back in her hotel suite, Seren stood by the window watching Manhattan's skyline shimmer like circuitry. She realized something. Revenge was never about watching them suffer. It was about no longer needing their validation. And yet, she couldn't deny how good it felt that they finally saw her. She opened her laptop and checked the Novamark dashboard. User count 3.4 million. Revenue rising. She smiled, but under that calm surface another thought flickered. If this was what they called success, what could she build next purely for herself? She decided to expand Novamark into an ecosystem, tools, branding, analytics, e-commerce, the works. It would take months, maybe years, but she had learned patience in the crucible of humiliation. By the time she launched the new platform Novaverse, she was on the cover of Forbes Tech Women. Her story wasn't just revenge anymore, it was blueprint. And as her fame grew, the contrast between her and her brother deepened. Landon's company began to wobble. The market dipped, a few risky developments went bad. When news broke that one of his major investors had pulled out, Seren's phone lit up again, this time with gossip from mutual acquaintances. Your brother in trouble, one text read. Rough timing. Seren didn't gloat, but she couldn't ignore the symmetry of it. He had once told her not everyone was built for the grind. Now he was learning that not everyone was built for collapse either. Months later, Landon called her. It was the first time he'd dialed her number in years. Hey, he said quietly, I need some advice. Seren leaned back in her chair, the Miami light washing across her office. On what? Investors, how to keep them from bailing. She let the silence sit long enough for him to feel it. Then she said, You'll figure it out, Landon. Not everyone's built for the grind. He inhaled sharply, but before he could reply, she ended the call. For the first time in a decade, she felt entirely at peace. Because she hadn't just proven them wrong, she'd outgrown the need to. The Miami summer rolled in heavy and bright. Most mornings Seren worked barefoot on the terrace, her laptop open to the endless blue of the Atlantic. She didn't count the money anymore. The company ran itself, her teams handled the expansion, her name had become shorthand for reinvention. One afternoon she got an email from her mother. The subject line was simply family dinner. It's been too long, your father and I would like to see you. We're sorry for how things used to be. Seren read it twice. A year ago that sentence would have lit her anger again, now it only made her curious. She booked a flight to New York. The restaurant they picked was the same one where they had celebrated Landon's first condo. She remembered sitting there as the ignored daughter, her hands folded in her lap while the others toasted his success. When she walked in this time, the hostess smiled. Ms. Vale, your family's waiting, may I take your coat? Her father rose as she approached. Seren, he said carefully, you look extraordinary. Her mother tried for warmth. We've missed you. Seren took her seat. The table was quieter than she remembered. The waiter poured wine, silverware chimed. Landon wasn't there. She asked, where's my brother? Her father hesitated. He's sorting things out, lost a few properties, the market's been rough. Seren nodded. I read the reports. Marcia sighed. We just wish you two could talk again, you've both changed so much. Seren smiled, small but real. Change is what happens when you stop believing people who say you can't. They looked at her, unsure whether it was an accusation or a truth too sharp to deny. The meal moved slowly. Her parents talked about ordinary things, health, travel, the weather. For once she didn't feel like defending herself. She simply existed in the space they had never given her before. When dessert arrived, her father leaned forward. "Seren, we were wrong back then about everything. We thought fear would make you stronger, it only pushed you away." Seren studied him for a long moment. "Fear doesn't build people, it builds cages." He lowered his eyes. "I know." She took a sip of wine, then set down the glass. "I bought that house because I wanted you to see me, but I kept it because I finally saw myself." Her mother's eyes glistened. "We're proud of you." Seren gave a quiet nod. "I know." That night she didn't stay in the city. She drove out to the airport, boarded a red-eye back to Miami, and landed just before sunrise. The mansion was still asleep when she walked in. She went straight to the terrace, opened the sliding glass doors and watched the horizon lighten. The sea was calm, a single pelican skimmed the water. She thought about that dinner years ago, the humiliation, the words that had burned her into motion. She could still hear them. "You'll never own a house like your brother." It almost sounded childish now. Her phone buzzed, a message from Landon. "Heard you saw Mom and Dad. Thanks for being kinder than I deserve." She typed back slowly. "We all build what we believe we are worth. Start there." She set the phone down. The morning sun broke over the water, flooding the room with gold. Seren breathed it in and finally felt what revenge was supposed to give: space, silence, and self-respect. She walked through the house one more time, fingers brushing the cool marble of the stair rail, the glass walls, the quiet proof of every night she'd worked when no one believed she could. At the doorway she paused, speaking softly to no one and everyone at once. "They said I'd never own a house like my brother. They were right. I built something no house could ever match. I built myself." She smiled, turned toward the ocean, and let the door close behind her. That line was the one that stuck. When the story of her rise eventually circulated again, on podcasts, in business schools, in every corner of the internet, that quote became the headline. And in living rooms everywhere, people who'd been underestimated repeated her words under their breath like a promise. For weeks after she signed the deed to the glass mansion, Seren Vale woke up each morning with the same question echoing in her head: "Is this what winning feels like?" Miami stretched out beyond the tall glass walls, a skyline of wealth and ambition that shimmered like a mirage. Her $5.2 million home was everything she had once dreamed of owning. But at night, when the city lights flickered off the ocean, silence crept through the marble halls. It wasn't the loud, satisfying kind of silence she'd imagined, the kind that meant victory. It was the kind that made her remember every word her parents had thrown at her. "You'll never own a house like your brother. You should have been more like him. You just don't have it in you, Seren." Now she had it all, and yet she couldn't stop hearing them. Her assistant, Ria Elcott, noticed first. "Seren," she said one morning, walking in with 2 iced coffees, "you've been staring at that ocean for 20 minutes straight. You didn't even open your laptop." Seren blinked. "I'm thinking." Ria smiled gently. "You've already built a company worth millions. Maybe think about what you want next." That hit her harder than she expected, because for the first time she didn't know. Weeks passed and success became routine. Novamark's stock price soared. Tech journalists called her the quiet force behind design's new frontier. She gave interviews, walked on stage for conferences, and smiled for cameras. But behind those calm eyes, something felt off. The revenge had been executed flawlessly. Her parents' disbelief, Landon's envy, the whispers spreading through her hometown, all of it. But revenge, she was realizing, was a temporary fuel. Once it burned out, what was left? One evening, her phone buzzed with a message she never expected to see again. "Landon Vales. I'm in Miami, can we talk?" She froze. For 5 full minutes she just stared at the screen. Then she typed one word. "When?" They met the next day at a small cafe near Brickell. Seren arrived early, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window. When Landon walked in, he looked smaller than she remembered, his once polished confidence replaced by the kind of weariness only failure brings. He smiled awkwardly. "You look good, really good." Seren gave a tight nod. "You too." He chuckled softly. "You don't have to lie." There was silence, filled only by the hum of espresso machines. Then he spoke again. Mom and Dad sold the house. Seren looked up. What? They couldn't keep up with the mortgage. I tried to help, but after my startup folded, he sighed. Let's just say things didn't go the way they did for you. Seren studied him, the brother who used to stand taller at every family dinner, who laughed at her small dreams. Now he couldn't meet her eyes. I guess I came here, he said quietly, to say I was wrong. She blinked. About what? About you, about everything. Her chest tightened, but she stayed still. I used to think you were weak, Landon continued. You always stayed quiet when Mom compared us. You let them walk all over you. I didn't realize silence can be power. He looked out the window. I wish I'd had that kind of patience. For a long moment, Seren said nothing. The ocean breeze carried through the window, soft and indifferent. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. I didn't do it to prove them wrong, she said. At least not at first, I just wanted to survive. Landon nodded slowly. And you did more than that. Then he smiled, a tired, genuine smile she hadn't seen since childhood. I'm happy for you, Seren, truly. And for the first time in years, she believed him. That night she sat on the balcony of her mansion and thought about everything that had led to this moment. Her family's words, the nights she cried over bills, the hunger that drove her, the look in her brother's eyes that day at the cafe, part regret, part admiration. She realized something no one had ever told her. Revenge doesn't always end with destruction. Sometimes it ends with recognition. Sometimes the silence after victory isn't emptiness, it's peace waiting to be understood. A few months later, Seren received another call. This time it was from her mother. Seren, her mother's voice was brittle, uncertain. It's been a while. Seren hesitated. It has. There was a pause, then her mother exhaled shakily. Your brother told us everything, about your company, about what you did. We're proud of you. The words hung in the air like fragile glass. Proud. After years of sneers, silence and side comments, they finally said it. But instead of joy, Seren felt something quieter, release. She smiled faintly. Thank you, Mom. Her mother sniffled. Maybe we could visit sometime. Seren looked around the sunlit hall behind her, at the art she'd chosen, the life she'd built. Maybe, she said softly, we'll see. When she hung up, she didn't cry. She just stood there, barefoot on the marble floor, watching the sunlight spill through the glass. The revenge was complete, but this wasn't the fiery satisfaction she'd imagined. It was better, calmer, more human. She thought about all the people who had doubted her, every dinner where she'd sat quietly while they praised her brother, every joke, every eye roll, every be realistic, Seren. And she whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, you don't have to prove them wrong, you just have to prove yourself right. In the months that followed, Seren changed her company's mission. Novamark began funding scholarships for underprivileged design students, kids who had been told they'd never make it. She launched mentorship programs for young women breaking into tech. Every headline mentioned her mansion, her millions, her brilliance, but what mattered to her now wasn't revenge, it was impact. At one charity gala, a young woman approached her shyly. Ms. Vale, she said, clutching a portfolio, your story inspired me to apply to design school. I was going to quit before I saw your interview. Seren smiled, truly smiled this time. Then don't quit ever. As the girl walked away, Ria whispered beside her, looks like you've started something bigger than revenge. Seren nodded, that's the point. And yet there was one last chapter she hadn't closed, the dinner table. The one where it all began. It happened on a quiet Sunday evening, almost a year after she'd bought the mansion. Her parents and Landon had come to visit. As the table filled with laughter, stories and cautious conversation, her mother suddenly smiled wistfully. Do you remember that dinner years ago, she said, when we told you you'd never own a house like Landon? Seren's father chuckled nervously, worst prediction of our lives. Everyone laughed, even Landon. Seren smiled too, but her eyes glimmered with something deeper. She raised her glass. I do remember, she said, and I'm glad you said it. They all looked at her. Because if you hadn't, I wouldn't have found out what I was capable of. Landon grinned. Guess we all needed that dinner, huh? Seren nodded. Yeah, we did. They clinked glasses. And for the first time, the laughter at that table didn't sting. It healed. That night, after everyone left, Seren walked out onto her balcony again. The Miami skyline shimmered, endless and alive. She whispered to the ocean. They said I'd never own a house like my brother. They were right. She smiled softly. Because mine isn't just a house, it's proof. And then, as if answering her, the city lights flickered brighter. Seren Vale, the girl who once sat silent while her parents compared her, the girl who built an empire from rejection, finally exhaled the last piece of her pain. She had outgrown revenge. She had built peace. And this time it was hers.